What could be more terrifying than finding in the desert a rib as long as a ship's mast? Learning that it is human. This is the story of a civilization of giants who raised the towers to the heavens and forgot who created them. Their pride was crushed by a wind that raged for 7 nights and 8 days without pause. The legendary city of Iram, buried beneath the sands for millennia, holds a terrible warning for all who consider themselves mightier than the heavens. Are you ready to learn how the greatest people of antiquity perished? The skeleton lay flat in the sand, and it took 200 paces to walk from skull to heel bones. The Arab caravan master who stumbled upon these remains in 1823 of the Christian era first mistook the ribcage for the collapsed vault of an ancient temple. The bones had been bleached by the sun to the color of ivory, polished by centuries of sandstorms to a marble sheen. Each rib was as thick as a ship's mast. The skull was the size of a living tent, the eye sockets so deep that desert owls had nested inside. This was not the only body. Further on, where the red dunes of the al-Khali rose toward the horizon in jagged ridges, lay others, dozens, hundreds, all facing one direction as if an invisible hand had swept them aside with a single motion. Between the skeletons were visible fragments of something else, shards of basalt columns, pieces of polished granite carved with symbols in a language no one remembered, fragments of buildings so massive that their doorway portals could admit an elephant without touching the lintel. The caravan master stood beneath the skull, and the shadow from the brow ridge covered him completely, sheltering him from the midday sun. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the horizon line. The smell was strange, not merely the dryness of desert, but something metallic, almost sulphurous, as if the earth itself remembered fire that had consumed this place millennia ago. The wind was rising. It always rose in these parts toward evening. But here, among the bones of giants, it sounded different. It whistled through empty eye sockets like a flute of death, howled between ribs with an organ's voice. And the caravan master, a superstitious man from a tribe that remembered old stories, hastily recited a protective prayer, because his grandfather had told him of the people of Ad, of those who were stronger than all on earth, of those whom Allah himself destroyed for their pride. And beneath the sand, at a depth of 10 meters, lay a city, an entire city, buried by wind over 7 nights and 8 days, 4,000 years ago. The people of Ad flourished in that part of the world which was now desert, but once, in the epoch after the Great Flood, had been a flowering valley between the mountains of Hadramaut. Rivers ran full, palm groves stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The earth yielded harvest 3 times a year, and the people who lived here were different, not merely tall, giants. Ancient Arabic chronicles, preserved in fragments on the walls of Yemeni caves, described their height at 40 cubits, about 20 meters by modern measures. Their bones, sometimes found in the sands, confirmed the impossible. A femur as long as an adult human. Skulls into which one could stuff an entire camel saddle. Vertebrae the size of millstones. Their strength was proportionate to their height. Legends said they carved dwellings in cliffs with a single sword stroke, their blades forged from meteoric iron and weighing as much as 4 adult bulls. They lifted boulders that 100 ordinary men could not budge. They killed elephants with bare hands, seizing them by the tusks and breaking their spines. Their capital was called Iram Dat el-Imad, Iram of the Pillars, a city of which the Quran says, the like of which was never created in the land. Archaeologists of the 20th century searched for its remains and found only hints, strange geometric anomalies beneath the sands of Oman revealed by satellite radar. Ruins buried so deeply that excavation seemed pointless. But those who lived before the catastrophe saw Iram in all its glory. Towers of white marble, quarried in mountains 300 kilometers away and carried on the shoulders of giants. Columns 200 meters high, each carved from a single piece of granite, adorned with inscriptions glorifying the might of Ad. Palaces with halls where ceilings were lost in shadow, supported by vaults that would seem like heavens to an ordinary person. Streets paved with basalt slabs, each the size of an ordinary city's marketplace. Fountains hurling water to the height of a 10-story building. Gardens laid out on terraces where grew trees of unknown species. The fruit of one could feed a family for a week. The people of Ad knew no enemies. Who could oppose beings for whom an ordinary human was the size of a child? They expanded their domains, subjugating tribes encountered along the way, not cruelly, rather condescendingly, as adults tolerate children's games. Those who submitted paid tribute and received protection. Those who resisted disappeared. Their wealth grew. Caravans brought gold from African mines, precious stones from Indian pits, silk from distant China. The giants adorned themselves with gold bracelets as thick as a human body, wore cloaks sewn from hundreds of tiger and lion pelts. Their weapons were inlaid with emeralds and rubies the size of fists. But their chief wealth was water. In a land where neighboring tribes died of thirst, Ad built an irrigation system that engineers many centuries later would call a wonder of ancient hydraulic engineering. They dug canals through mountains, redirected rivers, created reservoirs in rock formations. Their gardens bloomed even in the hottest summer. Fountains flowed year-round. And in this abundance, in this strength, in this power, something dark blossomed. Pride, not merely confidence in one's superiority, but conviction of equality with God. They looked at the sky and saw no one above themselves. They looked at the earth and considered it their plaything. When the Prophet Hud appeared among them, one of their own people but hiding divine revelation, they met his words with mockery. Hud was tall even by Ad's standards, but not strong of body. His strength was in words. He walked the streets of Iram, calling for renunciation of idolatry, of belief in their own invincibility, of forgetting the Creator. They listened, laughed, and turned away. "Who is stronger than us?" the leaders of Ad asked, standing in their palaces. "Who can punish us?" Hud pointed to the sky. "He who created you thus, he who can also destroy." But they shook their enormous heads. "We ourselves created our greatness. Our strength is from us. Our cities are the work of our hands. We have no need of gods." Years passed. Hud continued to warn. The number believing him numbered in dozens among thousands. The rest sank ever deeper into luxury and complacency. They held feasts lasting weeks, erected statues of themselves taller than their own height. One of the kings of Ad ordered his palm carved in rock. The work took 3 years. The result was visible from 100 kilometers away. The sky was silent. Rains came on time. Harvests did not fail. and this silence they took as approval, as proof of their rightness. If gods existed and were angry, would they not have punished already? But the sky was not silent. It was preparing. The changes began imperceptibly. First, the rains came a week later than usual, then 2 more. The rivers, always full, shallowed by a cubit. Grass in the steppes yellowed early. Caravans reported drying wells along trade routes. The people of Ad paid no attention. They had reservoirs carved in rock, enough for years of drought. Canals still carried water from mountain springs. Gardens required more care, but there were enough slaves. Hud walked through the city with a face dark as a storm cloud. "This is the beginning," he told those few who listened. "Repent while there is time." But his words dissolved in the noise of feasts and clinking of cups. The drought intensified. First year without rains, second, third. Rivers turned to streams, streams to wet furrows in cracked earth. Reservoirs emptied by half. Gardens began to die, first the most distant, then closer to the city. Palms shed their leaves, trunks blackened and cracked. The people of Ad, accustomed to abundance, faced rationing. Leaders restricted water use, ordered half the fountains closed. Some public baths ceased operation. People grumbled but did not yet panic. This is temporary. The rains will come. Hud climbed to the main square of Iram, where rose the statue of the greatest of Ad's kings, a colossus 300 meters tall, visible from any point in the valley. At the statue's base gathered thousands of giants. Hud cried out, and his voice sounded like a trumpet. "You built towers on every hill, amusing yourselves. You erected fortresses, hoping to become immortal. You wrought iniquity like tyrants. Fear him who granted you what you know, cattle and sons, gardens and springs." Laughter rolled through the crowd. One of the leaders, a being 25 meters tall, with arms capable of encircling an ancient oak's trunk, stepped forward. His voice thundered. "Hud, you brought us drought with your curses. You angered the old gods with your heresy. Be silent, or we will hurl you from the city wall." Hud did not flinch. "I did not bring you drought. You summoned it yourselves with your pride, and this is only a warning, the last one." 4th year without rains, 5th, 6th. Reservoirs emptied completely, canals dried up, exposing bottoms covered with silt that cracked into geometric patterns. The last gardens turned into cemeteries of trees, black skeletons reaching toward the merciless sun. Famine began. Not immediately. The stores of Ad were enormous. But even giants could not feed on air. Grain ran out. Livestock, left without water and fodder, died. Animals had to be slaughtered early, meat salted for storage. Caravans no longer came. The surrounding desert had become impassable. People began leaving Iram, first hundreds, then thousands. They departed in tribes, hoping to find water somewhere else. Most died in the sands. Some reached the ocean, founded settlements on the coast, degenerated over subsequent generations to ordinary size. Their descendants forgot the glory of Ad, remembering only vague legends of the time of giants. But the proud remained, the mightiest, the most stubborn, the most convinced of their rightness. They clung to Iram as a symbol of greatness. The city emptied by half, but those remaining did not surrender. They dug wells deeper, rationed water by drops, ate once every 3 days. Their strength faded, but pride held stronger than chains. In the 7th year, Hud again came out to the square. Now they listened to him differently, with hatred, but also with fear, because his prediction was coming true. He spoke quietly, but everyone heard in the dead silence of the dying city. Last chance. Repent. Acknowledge the Creator. Renounce idols. And perhaps, the water will return. The king of Ad, now thin as a skeleton but still gigantic, rose from his throne in his palace. His face was furrowed with the wrinkles of thirst, eyes sunken. But his voice rang firm. We are the people of Ad, strongest of the strong. We will not bow our heads before a phantom in the heavens. Let your God come, Hud. Let him try to break us. Hud looked at him with a long gaze, then nodded. You will receive what you asked for. That night he gathered the few believers, fewer than 100 remained of tens of thousands, and led them into the mountains. He said only one thing: tomorrow must not find you in the valley. In the morning, a cloud appeared on the horizon. At first it was only a thin black line at the desert's edge. Sentries on Iram's towers noticed it at dawn. By midday, the line had become a wall of black, roiling fog rising from earth to sky, blocking out the sun. Commotion arose in the city. People ran to the walls, stared at the approaching darkness. Some rejoiced. This is a cloud, meaning rain, meaning salvation. Others felt something wrong. Clouds do not move like this, do not advance as a solid wall, do not carry a sound like the roar of 1,000 enraged beasts. The king ordered the gates closed. A pointless order. What could gates stop against what was approaching? But he was king, accustomed to his will being obeyed, and the gates closed. 10-meter doors of cedar and bronze, capable of withstanding ram and siege. They lasted a minute. The wind struck the city at sunset of the first day, not gradually building, but all at once, crashing down like an avalanche. Its speed was such that air became a solid wall. The gate doors were torn from their hinges and hurled 100 meters deep into the city, where they smeared across stones everything in their path. But this was not merely wind, it was scorching. The temperature of air in the stream reached the point at which lead melts. The first giants caught in the blast screamed, but the screams cut off when air burned their lungs from inside. They fell, skin blistering, eyes melting from sockets. The wind roared. This was not the whistle of ordinary storm, but a roar that seemed alive, malevolent, purposeful, furious. The sound cut ears, penetrated the brain, stripped away the ability to think. Giants accustomed to cutting cliffs with swords fell to their knees, pressing enormous palms to their heads. The storm found everyone. Those who barricaded themselves in houses discovered that walls offered no protection. Wind seeped through the slightest cracks, grew inside rooms, swelled into tornadoes that ripped people from shelters and hurled them into the air. Palaces that had stood for centuries cracked at the seams. Columns 5 giants' girths thick swayed and snapped like dry branches. The king took shelter deep in his palace, in a hole carved into rock at a depth of 50 meters. Around him huddled his last courtiers. They heard the storm's roar overhead, felt the stone's vibration. The king sat on his throne, gripping the armrests so hard that basalt cracked under his fingers. His face remained unyielding. He would not bow his head, would not admit defeat, would not beg for mercy. The ceiling collapsed on the third night. Millions of tons of stone crashed down, crushing the throne room and all who were inside. But this was mercy. Those who remained on the surface died more slowly. The wind did not merely kill, it played with its victims. It lifted a giant into the air to a kilometer's height, held him there, spinning like a leaf, then released him. The body fell, broke on stones, but the wind would not let him die quickly, caught him again, hurled him another direction. For some, this cycle continued for hours, until nothing remained but pulverized mush. The towers of Iram, pride of the people of Ad, fell one after another. 200-meter columns of solid granite split in half. Tower tops were sheared off by wind and carried into the desert. The statue of the King Colossus stood longest, until morning of the 5th day. Then, even it began to lean. The fall lasted nearly a minute. The impact on Earth was such force that seismic waves reached the ocean 200 kilometers away. Sand arrived. The storm carried it from all the surrounding desert, by the ton, by mountains. An ocean of sand. Streets filled to the level of buildings' second floors, then to the roofs. The city was disappearing, buried alive beneath a shroud that grew ever thicker. On the 7th night, the wind reached the peak of its fury. The air glowed red from heated sand grains. Visibility dropped to 0. The sound became so loud that the last survivors' eardrums burst. They crawled blindly, not knowing where, suffocating, roasting alive in the stream of hellish breath. By dawn of the 8th day, it was over. The wind died as suddenly as it had begun. The air cleared. The sun rose over desert where once stood Iram of the pillars. The city had vanished. In its place lay dunes, red, perfectly smooth, as if nothing had ever stood here. Only here and there protruded fragments, a column top, a wall corner, the curved arm of a statue reaching from sand like a plea for help. And bodies, hundreds, thousands of bodies scattered across the desert for tens of kilometers around. They lay in neat rows, like sheaves after harvest, all facing one direction, toward where the storm had come from. Skin charred, faces twisted in death agony. But the arrangement was too regular to be random, as if an invisible hand had carefully laid them out, displaying its work. Hud descended from the mountains on the 10th day. With him were 87 people, all that remained of the people of Ad. They walked in silence, and only the wind rustled sand beneath their feet. The same wind that 3 days ago had been a weapon of divine wrath was now simply wind, warm, carrying the smell of sea. They reached the place where Iram's southern boundary had been, found only dunes. Hud stopped, and the others stopped beside him. No one wept. No tears remained. They stared at the silent desert, and each thought of those who lay beneath this sand. parents, children, brothers, sisters, friends and enemies, all equal now in their destruction. Hud raised his hand, pointing east. There, beyond the desert, lived other tribes, small, weak compared to Ad, but alive. We will go to them, the prophet said. We will tell what happened here, so they remember, so they do not repeat our mistakes. They set out, leaving the dead city behind. They walked slowly. The strength of giants had left them along with pride. They ate little, drank sparingly from their last leather waterskins. But they walked, because stopping meant death. After 20 days, they reached the first oasis. A small tribe of ordinary people lived there who were frightened seeing giants. But Hud spoke gently, explaining they were not enemies. They asked only for water and the right to pass. The oasis elder, a wise man who had seen many strange things in his years, permitted them to stay 3 days, and asked them to tell where they came from. Hud told. He spoke from sunset to dawn, and the tribe listened with bated breath. He spoke of Ad's greatness, of towers to the sky, of gardens in the desert. He spoke of pride, of warnings, of mockery. He spoke of wind, 7 nights and 8 days, of a river of blood and a mountain of bodies. He spoke so that listeners saw everything with their own eyes, felt the heat of hellish breath, heard the storm's roar. When he finished, the elder was silent for a long time, then asked, "And what have you survivors taken from this?" Hud looked at his companions. They sat around the fire, and flames cast shadows on their faces. Faces weary, aged decades in a month. Whatever you are, however strong you are, however mighty, you are no more than a grain of sand before the Creator. You can build towers to the clouds, but one breath of His will levels them with earth. You can consider yourselves gods, but you remain only creations. The elder nodded. Wise words. Expensive price for a lesson. Too expensive, Hud agreed. And I pray that no one else will have to pay such a price. They left after 3 days. Some remained at the oasis, too exhausted to go further. Hud, with those remaining, continued the journey. They walked for months, passing from oasis to oasis, from tribe to tribe. Everywhere they told the same story. Listeners passed it on. Thus the legend of the people of Ad began to spread across Arabia. Some believed, others considered it a tale, exaggeration, myth, the invention of a mad old man. How could giants 20 meters tall have existed? How could wind destroy an entire city? But then caravans passing certain routes through the desert began reporting strange finds. Bones, enormous bones, skulls the size of tents, building fragments protruding from sand after particularly strong storms, pieces of statues of inhuman dimensions. And those who had laughed at Hud's story fell silent. 100 years passed, 200, 500. Hud died, and they buried him in a place later forgotten. The 87 survivors scattered, dissolved into other tribes. Their descendants diminished with each generation, until indistinguishable from ordinary people. But memory of the catastrophe lived. It passed from mouth to mouth, accumulated details, was lost and found again. By the first millennium of the Christian era, Iram had become half legend. Poets and chroniclers mentioned it, but no one knew exactly where it was. The Rub al-Khali desert, the empty quarter, was too vast, too deadly for exploration. Caravan routes bypassed it. Only occasionally lost travelers reported ruins seen in the dunes, but finding these places again was impossible. Sands shifted, landmarks disappeared. In the 7th century, the Prophet Muhammad received revelation that mentioned Ad, a people of giants destroyed for pride by wind that Allah sent upon them 7 nights and 8 days without pause, so that you would have seen the people lying prostrate as if they were hollow trunks of palm trees. These words were recorded in the Quran, and the story received sacred status. Now it was not merely legend, but warning, inscribed in holy book. Centuries passed. Iram remained buried, but its ghost gave no rest. Adventurers, treasure hunters, archaeologists, all dreamed of finding the city of pillars, proving its existence, excavating treasures that rumor said lay beneath the sands. Most died in the desert. Some found fragments, hints, traces. No one found the city itself. In 1990, a NASA satellite scanning Earth's surface with radar capable of penetrating sand discovered a strange anomaly in Oman. Beneath dunes, at depths from 10 to 50 meters, lay structures clearly of artificial origin. Geometrically regular lines, rectangular forms, circles too perfect to be natural. An expedition was organized 2 years later. Archaeologists using satellite data began excavations at the point where the signal was strongest. They dug for weeks. Sand slid back. The work was hellish in the literal sense. Temperatures reached 50 degrees Celsius. But they persevered. At a depth of 17 meters, they found the first column. Basalt, polished to mirror sheen. Diameter 6 meters. Height, as far as they could trace, extended both deeper and upward. Covered with inscriptions in a language no one could read, symbols were carved deep. The hand of the sculptor holding the chisel must have possessed monstrous strength. They dug further, found a street, basalt slabs, each 10 by 10 meters, laid so tightly that you could not slip a knife blade between them. Along the street, remains of buildings, portals 20 meters high, rooms with ceilings lost in the darkness of unfinished excavations. They found bones. The first skeleton lay under debris of a wall that had collapsed on it. They measured. Length from skull to heels was 19 meters 70 centimeters. They decided they had made an error. Measured again. The result did not change. They found a second skeleton, 3rd, 5th, 20th, all approximately the same size, all clearly human in anatomy but enlarged in scale. The find should have been the sensation of the century, should have revolutionized understanding of ancient history, proved the existence of a civilization of giants, but instead it disappeared. Officially, excavations ceased due to sand instability and danger of collapse. The expedition was recalled. Finds, the few they managed to extract, were sent to storage in one of the museums and classified. Reports were sealed. Photographs disappeared from public access. Scientists who participated in the work signed non-disclosure agreements. some told later in private conversations, but were considered fantasists. The excavation site was buried by sand in one season. After 5 years, no trace of human presence remained. The desert reclaimed its own. Iram again sank into oblivion, as it had 4 millennia before. Why was it hidden? There were several reasons. Political. The territory belonged to a state that did not want international attention to its desert. Religious. Confirmation of the Quranic story of a punished people would create too many uncomfortable questions. Scientific. The finds fit no existing theory, and acknowledging the reality would mean revising all anthropology. But the main reason was simpler and more terrible. Those who descended into the excavated halls of Iram felt something. A presence. Weight. Oppression pressing on consciousness. The air there, at depth beneath sands, was strange. Hotter than it should be. Dry to the point of burning. And sometimes, when wind roamed the desert surface, in the depths of excavations sounded a noise. Distant roar, echo of something ancient. Workers refused to descend after sunset. Some left the expedition without waiting for contract completion. They told of nightmares, dreams where wind hunted them, where gigantic figures writhed in agony, where the city collapsed again and again in endless cycle of destruction. One of the archaeologists, who more than others explored the throne room, found at 40 meters depth, went mad a month after returning. He spent the rest of his life in a clinic, repeating the same thing. They are still there. They are still proud. They still have not repented. The wind has not finished. The site was deliberately buried. They brought bulldozers, collapsed the open shafts, leveled the surface, posted a sign in Arabic and English, danger zone, entry forbidden, risk of landslides. Local nomads had bypassed this territory even before the archaeologists arrived, knew it as a cursed place where spirits of dead giants wandered at night. The caravan master who found the skeleton in 1823 died a week after the discovery. His body was found 50 kilometers from that place, desiccated as if he had walked the desert for a month, though only 7 days had passed. Face frozen in expression of horror, eyes open, staring at sky. In his hand clutched a note in Arabic. The wind remembers. And indeed, every year in a certain season over the al-Khali sweep storms of particular fury. Meteorologists call them simply seasonal winds, normal for the region. But elders in tribes tell that this is not merely wind. It is memory. Memory of 7 nights and 8 days when heaven's wrath fell upon earth. Memory that does not let forget. The people of Ad vanished. Their cities are buried. Their bones bleach beneath sand worn by time. Their names forgotten, their achievements erased, their pride punished absolutely and finally. Of the greatest civilization, nothing remains but warning recorded in sacred texts and whisper of legends. But sometimes, when wind rises over the desert and sand begins to sing in a particular way, it seems voices are heard. Distant, distorted by distance and time. Voices of those who asked, "Who is stronger than us?" And the wind answers them, again and again, 4,000 years running. answers with a roar that knocks down, with heat that burns lungs, with fury that knows no mercy. Because some questions do not presuppose answers in words. Some answers are written by wind on sand, and this answer remains visible forever for those who have eyes to see and humility to understand.